Crown at Grandview, if you guys know that apartment complex.
I do.
When it was being built, we took the first 2 buildings exclusively as corporate apartments.
Wow.
One group, we had 138 properties that we managed for them in 3 markets. And of those, when everything shook out, we had about 5 investors left with about 25 properties out of that whole group. So that
was a bloodbath.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. But just imagining that you'd ever have an attorney on staff.
Yeah.
It's just insane. And at one point we had multiple attorneys on staff.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, and if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I probably would not have had the same opinion, but I think that a property manager in their entirety can be replaced by AI.
Interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Property Management Show. I am one of your hosts, and I have today my co-host. He's back on the mic. Welcome back, Matthew.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Well, we've got a fellow previous Birmingham property manager in our studio for a great episode. We've got Bryan Jenkins, who is the president of Genstone Property Management, with us. So Bryan, welcome to the studio and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I don't know, you've never been to our offices.
I have not. Last time I visited, you were at the house.
At the house. I was going to say, did you ever go to 1701? You did.
Yeah. To that old house?
Yeah. Last time we were riding around with, was that Mike Sony, I think, looking at a bunch of houses.
Oh, yeah. During the, that's right. That was kind of like the early institutional days.
Yes.
And we were going around looking at a bunch of houses.
He was probably there to pick up keys of doors that he stole from you.
That's probably true.
He was there to pick up all his keys
off. Now doors you guys
that's right. There's a lot of swapping back and forth here in Birmingham.
There is. I think all markets could probably say that. I listen to it in Atlanta all the time. It's, all the property managers there in the NARPM chapter talk about passing doors back and forth. So.
It's always best to be the second property manager, not the first. That's the secret.
That's correct. And if you're the third, there might be something wrong with the actual
owner. Yeah, for sure.
That's probably true.
Well, it can't be us.
No, it's never us. Never been us. It's never been us. Always been these bad owners. Well, Bryan, great to have you. Why don't we just kick off? We've kind of mentioned you started in Birmingham. You had a property management company in Birmingham. Tell us a little bit about your origin story, how you got into it, and to where you are today.
I've got a somewhat colorful past, I think. So I'm in my 25th year of property management, one form or another. So I actually moved to Birmingham from Washington State. So I came out of the military after serving for 9 years and just came here.
Out of one battle and into another.
Yes, absolutely. Problem solving for sure. But I'm the son of entrepreneurs. So my mom and dad have a franchise of automotive parts stores and garages in West Virginia, where I grew up. So I saw that modeled out, and I saw them working together, throughout my life. But just got into it and really fell into it by accident. I think most people would say that about property management. But aligned with, kind of met Ralph Moore. I think you guys know him from Birmingham. So,
I do.
Yeah. So Ralph and I and one other partner started acquiring properties early 2000s. And Ralph owns a corporate housing company, AHI Corporate Housing. My wife's been running it. She just hit her 36th anniversary, which is crazy and unheard of in today's world, right?
That's great.
So. But she was.
Did you meet her when you were working with Ralph? Is that how you met? Was that connection?
It is. And I was actually married before, and divorced, and then Sherry and I married in 2002. So we've been married for 23 years. Got my math right on that. That'll give me some brownie points. But yeah, I met her, and she was running the corporate housing operation. She was employee number 1 for him. So. When I linked up with him, he had about 68, 69 employees through all his companies. But we started buying houses for Honda manufacturing. And when they were moving their Japanese executives, senior level engineers in. So
that's what my partners did too. They did some of that and rented them
in Birmingham.
Yeah, in and around
Birmingham. Okay,
basically from Hoover to 280 to Trussville. Kind of those markets. And then we ended up buying 52 of them, and 52 A-class homes, and doing corporate leasebacks in 3 to 5 years. Even today, I think we have 22 of those still.
And that was a pretty lucrative business because they were paying really well.
Yeah, they were paying really well. And we were in a position where we could provide them rental comp so they could decide on what the housing allowance was for their executives. And so it worked really, really well. And then they, they're still doing some corporate apartments for Honda all these years later. They were tied into their advanced party when they got here first in 98, I think it was. And so all these years later, very loyal clients. So.
Yeah, sounds like Honda's on a budget now if they're doing apartments instead of houses.
Well, at one point when Crown at Grandview, if you guys know that apartment complex.
I do.
When it was being built, we took the first 2 buildings exclusively as corporate apartments.
Wow.
And those were all Honda units. So I think at their height with us, they probably had close to 200 corporate apartments that they were rotating people in and out of. That's dwindled down to next to nothing now. But anyways, it's that kind of got me into it. And then Realty South, I don't know if you guys know Debbie Robinson, used to be with Realty South. So Tommy Brigham brought her in. That had to be, I guess, 2002-ish. And she came in to take over the reload department. And they had Rent South, if you remember Rent South.
I do.
Yep.
It sounds great and grand from what I'm about to tell you, but it really wasn't. But the idea with Rent South was that the agents would refer rentals back to their own rental division. And they were in their corporate headquarters, and she approached us and asked if we would like to purchase those contracts. So that was late 2003, so Q4 2003, and we made the decision to go ahead and do that. And got them for next to nothing.
I bet that those were the good old days.
Yeah. Well, they were as big as Realty South was. They were managing out of a index card box, and their accounting was taking care of all the accounting, obviously. But they had 1 property manager full time and then 2 part times, and subbed everything else out. So we took those doors on. They were 100% accidental landlords. I know that term now. So. And that's how we built our business up to the point, I think 2005, we started taking on some clients out of California, a couple of investment networks, diversifying there a little bit. And then, when the market changed, came out of that on the other side and went to Ralph, and it's like we need to really diversify, not only our client types, but our portfolio, what we're managing. So at that point, we were only managing largely, I would say 95% of that portfolio was accidental landlords, just retail. So we shifted gears and we went and started picking up C-class assets as well. And then, trying to manage what percent of Section 8 we were managing, but started focusing in on IMN. Came across IMN with the idea of going, and we had success in, just shopping I'd say smaller funds and small REITs, and had success with that. We'd have a couple of those at a time with 200, 300, 400 doors. Figured out that cycle of, you keep them 2, 3, maybe 4 years if you're lucky before they sold to a bigger fish and, somebody internalized property management. So,
can I ask you a question real quick? Why did you all think you needed to diversify into C class when you were essentially A, right?
Yeah. The shift in the market taught us a lot. The investment group out of California, their teaching was pulling equity out of the properties and purchasing additional property. So they were all expanding their portfolios.
Right. So you knew you could get more more units per owner.
Most of them went into short sale or foreclosure. There were, we had that one group, we had 138 properties that we managed for them in 3 markets. And of those, when everything shook out, we had about 5 investors left with about 25 properties out of that whole group. So that
was a bloodbath.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It really was. And we got lean for a little bit, and then we started scaling back, and then opportunity. And the opportunity we took was taking our single location and then branching that into multiple locations with clients. So we would seed it with a client, an institutional client of some size, and then build a retail around it. So we expanded into Huntsville and Mobile first, and then Montgomery, and then Oklahoma City. So the idea was the growth trajectory we were on, corporate housing had locations already, so they had the brick and mortar. So we were just plugging talent and technology.
That's
and
nice.
systems, yeah. So and then people started knocking and wanted to see if we were interested in selling. And Ralph is 14 years my senior, so he was ready to exit that business. And really, I didn't have the interest at the time of being sole owner, So we ended up selling to Pure in September of 21, and then I joined Pure and kind of promoted some of my folks up, and then I moved on to the institutional management team and worked with Pure for just about 3 years. So I just left there.
Wow, that was a long time.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that long. That's great.
Yeah. So really enjoyed it, but the thing we were trying to do with the institutional vertical was the timing was off. So we tried it mid 21, and we all know what happened in 22. So
Yeah.
well, I'll take that back, mid 22, and then we were doing some legwork on the front end and setting everything up. But by the time we got operational, it was July of 22, and then Q4 hit, and then
Yep, interest rates start to rise, and we had a little bit of this conversation before we hit play, and it was interesting we've been talking about how the institutional business has been shut off from buying houses for the last 2.5, 3 years as interest rates rose, and they just turned their attention on their property managers because that was the only way. They had a lot of calories to burn, and they needed to burn them somehow, and they were buying a lot of houses.
Yeah.
And now they need to focus on efficiency and making the numbers work. And
that's how the cycle works.
they turn their focus onto the property managers. So the property managers have gotten pretty good.
Yeah. So when you can't focus outward, you focus inward.
That's right.
But coming into the Q4, we had 23,000 new construction doors in our pipeline. And over the next basically year and a half, 2 years, not quite 2 years, we ended up with about 10% of those. So everything else shut down. Even today, I just had a previous client actually reach out to see if I knew anybody that was looking to buy build-ready lots. So a lot of these projects, they started off the ground, but then they're on pause, and everybody's trying to reposition even today. So from there, when I left Pure, I went to work for a company called Lineage Technologies, and Lineage was born from an investment group called RP Capital, and a lot of people don't know the story behind Lineage, but RP Capital, the founder there is Ron Phillips, and Ron is out of Charleston. So Ron's been doing that since 2005, building that investment network, going coaching and selling, and they're still doing some pretty decent transaction load. But he saw the need. It's basically back to what we've all focused on in years past of communicating with clients and them understanding how their assets are performing, and then giving them feedback on that. So they were doing the annual property reviews and going through portfolios, and as that scaled, it became more and more difficult. Right, they were limited. So Ron come up with the idea to put some money into technology to provide some dashboards that would help with that and measure performance. And from that, they spun a digital marketplace off of that and curated new construction, build to rent, and then turnkey, so renovation turnkey properties. So when I joined them, they were moving about 40 properties a month still. So last year, so that number's increased. I think they ended last year with 61% of the sales were repeat buyers from within their investor network, so we're building their portfolios.
Wow.
And I talked to them a couple weeks ago. That number for this year is 71%. So they've had an uptick there. And they're doing about 45 to 50 transactions a month now. So,
and these are build to rent and
or
turnkey.
Yeah.
Or
so
turnkey,
they're not what they're not putting on their platform is anything that's coming out of a property management company's inventory that wants to reposition or whatnot. So
right. Yeah.
they can help with repositioning. It's just good ecosystem, and they're bouncing those back to the property managers to broker out to within their own brokerages or partner with a real estate brokerage to liquidate those. So moving off of that, I'd started talking with Genstone back in June of last year, and so Genstone's a bit more complicated. So it's kind of what Ralph and I attempted to do, because we had corporate housing, we had insurance, we had a mortgage brokerage in house for a while, property management. What we were attempting to do, creating an ecosystem, right? Reselling properties as we go through property performance. If we want to reposition, do some 1031 exchanges on a much smaller scale. So Genstone actually started as face servicing back in 2008. Ed Face started it in Chicago out of a garage, kind of one of those stories. He tells the tale of back then, before VoIP, you could have, I think it was 2 residential lines per company into your house. So he had like 3 companies servicing his house, running the business out of the garage. And just during that crisis time and being able to come in and start loan servicing, helping people. It's kind of morphed today into, do a lot of business purpose loan servicing of those loans and DSCRs, and currently service over 100,000 loans. And from that, they started building individual business units within the model underneath face servicing. So we actually have in-house, we have asset management, REO management, property management, realty. We have insurance, title, a national repair and maintenance platform, which was, it still is, it hadn't rebranded yet, but ZVN Properties, if you've come across them at IMN, that's our repair and maintenance company. And then we have Genstone Construction, which is renovations and ground-up construction. So everything's uniquely situated to facilitate that life cycle.
Yeah, y'all do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And you were brought in to run the property management business.
I was, and to introduce the idea of traditional property management. So, it's casting a wide net. So we're casting the net for those accidental or retail landlords, as well as intentional investors, institutional investors. And then, of course, we'll still continue to do the distressed asset management and REO management.
And what markets are y'all managing homes?
Right now we've got stuff scattered because of the distress in REO. We're operating in 12 states right now.
Wow.
The other part of the plan when I came on that's exciting is we're opening regional office locations. So our first open was Orlando, and we've opened in Atlanta and St. Louis, and we're actually going to be opening in Birmingham again.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Home turf. I know a little bit about that.
And the regional offices will run each one of those verticals out of the regional office. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, we stand a flag up traditionally on realty. So we actually recruit the broker in with their agents, stand the realty up, and then bring property management and the other services.
That's interesting, because I would have thought you would have said I guess the servicing, you don't need a regional office, but you need boots on the ground for brokerage. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we're Kansas City. I know that's on the map for this year. New York, believe it or not. And then we've brought some other brokers in-house that we're not going to stand up an actual regional office quite yet, but that's the game plan. So
that's great. The challenge, I would be curious, what are some challenges you're seeing that managing across all these multiple markets?
Well, it's just even working at Pure, I think as detailed and broken out as Pure is in its entirety. In-house at Fay and Genstone, we actually have compliance and legal. That's probably the biggest challenge, is understanding from a compliance and legal standpoint.
Yeah.
Set up your licensing correctly, and we're going through a rebranding right now, so it's even more complicated.
It's funny. I never really, when you and I kind of cut our teeth in SFR world, similar time, you were a little bit before me. I think I bought my first house in 2003. but just imagining that you'd ever have an attorney on staff.
Yeah.
It's just insane. And at one point we had multiple attorneys on staff, and we have a whole compliance department, and it's just kind of crazy what it's become.
And we're broken out. So we have our business presidents, and then we have group presidents. So like I fall under the property services group. So So our group president used to be one of the owners of ZVM Properties, Bryan Jenkins, and I've known Bryan through IMN about the same amount of time I've known Noel Christopher, who's also working with us.
Yeah, Noel, we worked with Noel for quite some time, and obviously enjoy him, and he's a really good guy.
I think everybody knows Noel
for sure. I mean, he's very well networked.
Yeah.
My question would be, is it, I guess Fay, that's kind of like the parent company. Mm-hmm. Is that privately owned? And then are y'all private equity backed? Like how do y'all?
Just privately owned.
Nice.
So yeah.
Even better, I guess.
I think last number I heard you guys was 600 plus employees. Were similar. We just sold off a constructive loan piece of our business that was tied to somebody else, but when I first came on, we were floating right around 850 employees.
Wow.
So yeah, and then we actually have FSI. So we have a remote team member company in Zambia. That's actually owned.
No, that's cool.
Zambia, interesting.
Ed Fay and his brother John Fay actually lives in Zambia and runs it.
So how many of those people are remote that work for that company for y'all?
We have I think the last count I saw was like 234.
Okay.
That company working in addition to our 600 plus employees. So.
Do y'all use those remote team members? Obviously at Pure, you used them at AHI, I would imagine.
We did.
Was that
I was
mostly
probably slow to adopt them at AHI, but once I got on board with it.
Well, that's not a bad thing. You never want to be on the bleeding edge of anything in this business. I found every time I feel like the group that whatever the great idea is hasn't figured it out yet. And when you just dump a bunch of properties on them, they mess it up. So we've used a few vendors. We had to terminate them and then come back to them lately. Won't name any names, but and then I'm curious how y'all are thinking about the future at Genstone, especially around property management. Your mandate is to go grow the property management business?
Yes. Yeah, that's the mandate. So, I'm kind of going back into
you were out though. Like one of the things I'm struggling with is
10 months.
You finally got out of property management. You made it out, and then you got drugged right back in.
I'm one of these guys, and I've always said this. It's like, being in the business as long as I've been in it, and then, during those interviews, and you guys can relate to this, you'll know within the first 10 minutes of conversation with somebody, do they love property management, or are they just looking for, something to do, basically? Do they hate it? And then I see people that have gotten out of it and come back into it, and it's just decade after decade after decade. That's their, they come back to it. They didn't realize they loved it until they got out of it and missed it. I just, honestly, for me, stepping out for the 10 months with Lineage was just a chance to clear my head a little bit.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm a relationship guy, so it's always about relationships. And at the end of the day, our business is still about relationships, and I don't think any amount of technology is ever going to change that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a people business, and I think great technology is ultimately going to empower people to do great things and have better information and make better decisions. Maybe one day the technology is going to take over, but I don't think it's anytime in the next decade.
Well, I was just at IMN Austin, the SFR Ops and AI conference. Typically go to that one. That's a pretty good one for property managers. But a lot of the conversation, just like all the other conferences for the last couple of years, have been focused around AI.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then what we were discussing was very pointed. It's like, what positions within your company do you feel that AI could replace in the future? And talking about retooling your employees and, doing some different things. So, I think at the end of the day, and if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I probably would not have had the same opinion, but I think that a property manager in their entirety can be replaced by AI.
Interesting.
Really?
Tell me more.
Yeah. So I've just come across some AI vendors in the last 2 years that the first one I came across was a company called HIO, HIO, and their focus was in the multifamily space. And where they got started was you could take your SOPs and load them into the AI. And then the model was for these big multifamily operators, they've got, multiple complexes. The example is if you have somebody that comes in and wants to break their lease and they talk to an assistant property manager. And then 3 days later, you've got somebody else that comes in, talks to another assistant property manager. And quite frankly, they're probably going to get two versions of what they're supposed to do, right? So the idea is that this AI component would be available to the employees to check to see what protocol was for the company so that you would get the same exact protocol.
Which makes sense. Hey, somebody's here to break their lease.
Yeah.
What is versus looking into your database to find the process. It's almost like an agent that helps them.
It's like Notion on call. Like you just call it up and.
Exactly. Now the human element of that, you have to, put forth the same exact lease every single time. If you don't, there's variations of that out there, right? So,
sure.
So in working with them and just kind of talking through it from an advisory standpoint. So one of the questions I asked them was like, why don't you take it a step further and back to a compliance standpoint? So look at the landlord-tenant laws within the state, load that information into the AI platform, and then reason both of those together. Make sure you're going to review it from a compliance and legality standpoint, but just making sure that your operators understand what it is they're saying and they're staying within the guidelines of the law. So, in a future state, I could see if a company really wanted to push that, is they could really utilize the AI to even upload anything on a municipality level, county level, state level.
Yep.
And all their operational documents,
yeah.
SOPs, procedures, et cetera.
Yeah, and you can see as new laws come out, just uploading that, and you have immediately you're abiding by whatever the new rule is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't, the weird thing would be like, is somebody going to be willing to interact with a AI agent?
Yeah.
I think at some point, yes.
They're already starting to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you may on a maintenance work order love to just log in and deal with an AI agent, right? You don't necessarily need to talk to somebody.
I mean, leasing. You're
leasing.
regurgitating the same information to people all day long. So
yeah, there's some definite use cases
yeah.
for it. Sure.
Yeah, and I think there's always going to be, when I say they're replaceable, there's always going to be a human element in the back that's going to have to deal with those special cases.
Well, they can go on and do other things and solve other problems and let the repetitive stuff be handled by an agent.
And that's my point with technology and implementing technology. Like the last thing you want, because what I'm hearing now is that as people start to implement some of this AI technology, they're getting a lot of pushback from their teams saying, oh, it doesn't work, and you have this fear that AI is going to take that job. And so I thought about it through similar to lean manufacturing. One of the things they said during lean manufacturing is you never want to eliminate jobs as a result. Now, essentially fire people as a result, right? Because really what you want is people to buy into the whole idea of lean manufacturing.
Hey, we're going to get better. We're going to be able to do more.
That's right. And so you either repurpose those people, or as people leave, you just don't replace. So, what you want is like a healthy ecosystem. And that's the way I'm thinking about AI is, hey, we can't get into a situation where we're laying off people because of AI.
Right.
We can't just say, oh, AI took your job, because we actually need their help to implement a lot of this stuff. And so we've got to figure out a way to do it in a healthy way so that people recognize they're not going to lose their job. They're going to be doing more high return things. It's going to be
correct.
It's going to be handling the repetitive stuff. It's going to be handling the context, giving the context of the landlord-tenant law, or the context of historical context of the house, and empowering our team members to make great decisions.
Yeah, and there's so much of it that's out there right now. It's even on the lower level. I feel like being able to take going back to the property performance and being able to scrub that performance and rise to the top, like equity positions in properties or underperforming properties, and how you could better position those, making those decisions. And one of the other things we were talking about is I looked at two walkthrough companies that are actually integrating AI. And this is a good example of not doing away with somebody, but actually, working in a partnership with AI. So both of these companies actually use LIDAR technology. You go through, you film it, it measures linear surfaces for you. And then it's also establishing a baseline inspection. So the next time you go through, it's comparing that to the original baseline, identifying differences, and then it takes it a step further. You can actually pull in regional pricing for product and workmanship. Or like in our case, if you have a maintenance company, you can load your pricing.
Yeah, you just enter all your stuff in.
So out of that, you produce a scope of work with pricing for the owner for the turn. But then you flip it over, and it actually will produce a security deposit disposition. You can load in normal wear and tear standards, and then it determines what's normal wear and tear. You still have a human eye, human perspective on it, but then it's produced out the door. It pulls in the associated video clips, attaches it to the damaged items, and voila.
Yeah, what used to take an hour or two now takes seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing something like that here at Evernest now. I don't think I'm ready to talk about it yet, but it's pretty cool.
Nice.
It's like shocking what the technology can do for us.
Yeah.
You're going to replace the whole marketing department?
Yeah, it's basically director of marketing in a box.
Great.
For $22 a month.
So I'm 25.
I mean,
so you're saving a couple of dollars
for $22 a month.
I'm just looking like down in the future, and we're already to robo taxis, driverless cars.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to be to robots. So I'm imagining some of these.
Yeah, I mean, I'm standing on the corner at the hotel in Austin, and there's self-driving taxis, and then there's food delivery robots. Getting across the.
No humans involved.
Walmart's got drones dropping packages now in Bentonville. They're piloting that, and I just see a future where we're going to have more of that ability to walk houses, like not even sending people out there. And I just think as people become more and more comfortable with it, it's just going to be
the walking the house part. I think is a difficult problem for technology to solve. But I do. One of the things thoughts I did have the other day is, we have our property managers basically sitting behind a desk, and we have property management technicians that are out riding around. Well, I think those jobs are actually going to come closer together, because if I can just hop in my Tesla and punch in an address and then work the whole time while I'm in the car on the way to the next, or deal with a phone call, or basically not have to drive, then I can do basically both of those jobs. I can go walk a house. I mean, one of the challenges we've had is when our property managers aren't actually laying eyes on the house and then having a conversation with an owner. That's a more difficult. They're having to look at a report and basically use our PMTs as their eyes and ears. And look, I mean, it's not, if you're a PMT and you're listening to this, we're not like replacing you. But I guess the whole point is you could almost be a PM. You could move up into a PM position once some of this autonomous vehicles, once we can, fully work in the Tesla.
Yeah, and then repurposing some of your polished PMs that have experience to, actually for kind of expand upon a biz dev role, if you will. Have more face-to-face actual relationship conversations, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be really easy to jump in a car and work all the way to a BDM appointment.
Yeah, to an appointment, right.
Close more deals.
Yeah.
Spencer used to have to go in person. I could close them all on the phone, though. It was pretty easy.
Different markets, right? So we found out that going to Denver or Nashville, they wanted to see you at the house, especially these accidental landlords who are like, hey, this is my home. It's in Brentwood. It's going to rent for $5,000. They want to see you walk the property with them. Versus in Birmingham, we were just doing it all on the phone.
Yeah.
And so these investor markets.
Much like you guys, I mean, that's, I started off sitting across the dining room table from people, and as you get more experience, and then before we sold AHI, we were largely, very rarely do we ever go look at a house.
Yeah, so. It's funny how people's perception of a property manager is more through the eyes of like a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Especially if they're a accidental landlord, than it is a service provider. Right. Especially in places like Denver.
Meaning you're thinking that they're just like, hey, they're there to rent the property. And once it's rented,
they're kind of like they're kind of like my person. And I need to like call my person.
All right.
That's the way I think Nashville and Atlanta owners, or excuse me, Nashville and Denver owners. But less so now, though. Mm-hmm. I think people are starting. If you'll recall, when we first introduced like lock boxes, digital lock boxes. Yeah. I mean, some owners were going to lose their mind that we weren't there to show the property.
Remember those days?
And we were. We used
like
to
it's
brag
better for you, I promise.
Yeah, we used to brag about our Rently number. It was like we were like one of their first customers, but owners would just if they we almost. I mean, I hate to say this, but we wouldn't tell them about it. We would just do it, and then if they got frustrated, we would try to explain it. But it was in their best interest because I got so frustrated one time. I drove from, y'all appreciate this, from Center Point all the way to Midfield to show a house on a Friday afternoon. And it took, if you're in Atlanta, it's like, this is not a big drive, but in Birmingham, you should be able to get everywhere in 15 minutes. And I bet it took me 45 minutes or an hour to get there. And I showed up, and of course they no-showed me, on a Friday afternoon.
You're like, I'm never doing this again.
I'm never doing it again.
Can't get that 45 minutes back.
There's got to be a better way.
You didn't have a Tesla driving. You weren't working.
It was. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah. Well, and the whole industry just keeps evolving. I sometimes wonder, it's like prior to 2010, the property managers that were in the space, because it just seemed like it was the same thing decade after decade after decade.
It really was. It was, especially in our world, it was one brand.
Yeah.
Who I still am mad at, but I'll tell you that story offline.
But you still see their car around.
Do you?
Well. Yeah, I've seen it before.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
You're speaking in the singular, so you see their car.
Yeah, well, it could be multiple. I don't know. I have no idea.
That was the brand when I was growing up that I saw in all the yards. My mom had a rental house growing up, so I would always, like, for whatever reason, because I had that context, I would see.
We don't really even have to have a conversation. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. You'll appreciate the story. I know everybody's now dying to hear the story online, but I can't. It's too bad. But I would be curious. Where do you think the industry is headed? Where do you feel like 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now? Because 5 years, if you look at this industry over the last 5 years, it's changed so drastically. Yeah. And what does the next 5 years hold?
Well, and I had this thought the other day, and we were talking about two things. So implementation of remote team members and the time that it took for everybody to grasp that concept and run with it, right? And the second thing was the self-showing lock boxes. But fast forward, COVID happens, and now both of those things are mainstream, right? Within our industry. So it is hard to think. I used to think in terms of decade versus 5 years, but I think at the rate that things are changing, I think it's even a more narrow view. I think it's, a 2 to 5 year vision. And that's such a broad question. And I've given it some thought, but I've got differing answers.
Okay.
I truly think that,
you're kind of like me. You don't want to be too risky by telling exactly.
I do think AI is going to have a bigger part in it. I think teams are going to become more lean, more efficient. We're seeing some of that now. We said if you're not looking outward, you're focused inward. A lot of companies are focused inward, but there are, thousands of property management companies that just want to stay in their little lane in their one metro or small town, and they have no ambitions of doing anything other than that. So they've got.
I actually think they're going to be okay.
They are.
I think like if you're 200, 300 units, boutique, operate in one market, have a team, like I think you're going to be okay.
Versus what? What's the alternative?
I think it's going to be very barbell. I think you're either going to have the, call it Targets and Walmarts, or you're going to have the boutique and you're not going to have much in between. I think the way I've always framed it, and I've thought this for the last 2 or 3 years, and I still believe it, is if you're too big to know your customers, but you're not big enough to get the benefits of scale, you're going to be in real trouble.
That's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where I would say, like, and I don't know what that is. Everybody would need to make that decision for themselves. But I think that technology, the bigger groups are going to have the ability to rapidly spend the money on technology and integrate the technology and give the leverage to their PMs. The problem, and I said this on the Ray Hespin podcast we did a few weeks ago. The big problem has always been between those of us you were with Pure and the Evernest and the other big groups, has always been that what we were when we were smaller, what you were when you were just like 300, 400 homes, is you just made really good decisions as a boutique property manager. And then the business started to grow and you started to have team members making some of those decisions. But when the business is small, the boutique business is small, that owner makes great decisions for their client. And as the organization gets bigger, it's harder to scale that good decision making. But I think what's going to happen is that technology, namely AI, is going to allow for better decision making by our PMs. It's essentially going to, because it's really what makes a great decision. The easiest way to think about it's like repairs and maintenance. What makes a great repair and maintenance decision is historical context of the home, plus what does that cost? What should that cost in my market? And if you have those two things, or what, even what should I do given this situation with this unique water heater or, HVAC, given its age and its, all the things, and then taking all those factors and making a good decision. The small property manager, and because they have enough reps, they intuitively do that. They intuitively will go and say, oh, that air conditioner needs to be replaced. They can just look at it and tell. And that's the challenge the bigger PMs don't have is, if you've been here 30 days, it's harder to make that decision. But the day is coming very quickly that those types of decisions, the system will help predict the best decision.
Well, what was also unique about like when you started Evernest and when you joined AHI is you also have the context of, it's not just like I understand the property and have context of the property, but
we were both owners.
You're owners, right? You're owners of rental properties, and you have empathy when the client calls, and you're like, well, what would I do in this situation? That somebody who's new in property management doesn't have that.
One of the best things that ever happened to me years ago is Sherry and I actually built a house when we got married back in 2002, lived in it till 2005. So we had that emotional attachment, and then we flipped it into a rental property for the next 13 years before we
Nothing like being your own client, right?
Everything else I had was by design, it was an investment property. So to me, it had different value, right?
Yep.
Those were numbers versus the emotional attachment. That gave me a link to that owner, that accidental landlord that's moving on the property. Yeah. You scrape that wall, it's a little different than, messing up the paint in the other one.
There's nothing like that empathy for the owner. And, that's another thing, like getting.
But I think AI will pull some of that in too. They'll think of it from an investor standpoint. Like if it were an investor, they'll have that context, which I think would be really interesting.
And that's where I think some of the larger operators kind of get away from it. And as you were talking about the small boutique, I remember those days. And in those days, you knew every property. You had been to every property.
You had all the context.
Yeah, whether it was you or a member of your team, somebody had laid eyes on that property, knew it intimately. You're tracking the age of the HVAC, the age of the water heater, et cetera, and you're making those decisions on behalf of an owner. So now it's like, even for me, we've got properties in Georgia. My property manager over there will say, hey, dishwasher's not working. Here's the cost to replace it. Well, if you don't provide me the information, I'm going to ask the questions of, how old is it?
How old? Yeah. When was the last time we replaced it?
Yeah.
And what's cost versus repair? or repair versus replace cost, and those things let me make an educated decision on my own as the investor. So I think AI is going to take some of that out of the equation and make that for you. I ran Tucker McDermott.
The name's super familiar.
So he was with a company called Source 7 for a while, and this is when I was I met Tucker, I think IMN East, and he was talking about they were working on kind of in tune with what Ray's.
They have some data that
lots of data.
Yes,
and they could, he's like, looking at this Whirlpool dishwasher, and the average lifespan on it's 13 years. Well, if you've got a repair at year 11, and it's during vacancy, and you've got a resident moving in, we can have some predictability as to the failure rate and what's going to fail. Is it going to leak water over, cost additional monies for repair and replacement of damaged product? So a lot of we're going to see a lot of that within the industry, I believe.
Totally agree. Yeah. Totally agree. Going back to yours, you were my first customer, first client at Evernest. So what I would do is on all the repairs on my homes, I would just put them on your homes and just say, charge that to.
I was out of the country. I wouldn't have known any better anyway.
It was so.
No,
I had free repairs and maintenance.
You actually didn't, because the best thing I did was I planted Roland in your office. And do you think he let you get away with anything?
Roland was like a big bulldog. I would actually. It was the opposite. I would just put y'all's repairs on my house.
I'm just going to pay for it.
So I wouldn't have to deal with Roland.
Talk to Roland.
I was going to ask you if you snail mailed his statements to him after that. So,
And he was in Africa, and I would mail it over there.
I just dug up, for some reason, I don't know in what email I found it in, but I was looking at some old emails and found one of the first statements that Evernest sent me back in the fall of 2008. And it was all these houses. And
what was it from? Property Boss? Or I bet it was from Propertyware.
It was from whatever you were using back in 2008, and it was from you, and it was the spreadsheet.
I'd like to see that.
And it was like
actually.
Bryan had, I think, Bryan. Maybe it came from Bryan. I can't remember your property manager back then, but So that was. So I knew I was a client in the fall of 2008.
Bryan Miles, right?
Yeah, Bryan.
That's
Miles.
right.
That's who we're talking about. Yeah, you know Bryan, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, that's interesting. The fall of 2008, but because we started the business in March of 2008.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, it was a good thing for you that Roland was there and you weren't reviewing statements,
watching like a hawk.
So one of the things that I adopted at AHI when we were growing and dealing with intentional investors and institutional investors was starting to do. I know you guys do podcasts and doing some of that, but also doing some, quarterly webinars and, inviting people in and recording those and sending them out. And
yeah, our marketing department lost all their discipline doing that.
So I think
we used to do that, Bryan. We don't do that much anymore.
From doing some of that. So
what's that? Y'all are going to start doing?
I think larger companies can benefit from doing some of that. So
there's a big gap in the market right now.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's Jock from
Jock's a great dude.
So they've started doing some webinar content. So starting to see some of that come out, but I always thought that, I had investors that, and clients actually, one of my clients, Susan Grimmer, I don't know if you know Susan Grimmer or not, but she's a commercial property manager and manages, the big shopping center up there in Oxford, and a couple around Hoover and so on. But we'd had her since that transition from Rent South. And, the first one we sent out, she reached back out and said, "Hey, I just want to, give you guys kudos because this is amazing." So
that's great.
Just telling us what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it benefits me, how it benefits the resident, and how it benefits you guys. So just that open communication piece.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, anytime you can provide some transparency for your clients, for your residents. We've been talking a lot. In fact, one of the reasons I was a few seconds late is we've been talking a lot about communication, like what does great communication look like and how can we teach our PMs how to be great communicators. The last thing you want to do is confuse the client.
Yeah.
And when you confuse the client, it loses trust, and then that erodes into, now they double check everything, and it takes more effort to manage them. And what you want is a client that trusts you a bunch, and that way you don't have to do a bunch of communication with them.
Well, we were talking about, moving from that model to where you're having to more or less defend what you're doing,
Yeah.
for your price point, and you're trying to sell on that level. When you start providing that content, that was the transition that we saw. Once we started doing podcasts and webinars and communicating, and then we would source those resources, right? So you'd have a conversation with somebody, send the resources off post phone call, post Zoom, and we were doing Zoom before COVID, and Zoom was that increased our closure rate by nearly 20%.
That's great.
So, but it was, those conversations no longer revolved around what you were charging, because you were giving them valuable content, and they could tell you knew what you were doing, right, and the benefit to them. So I think there's something to that. I think it's even on larger scale, I think if there's a way to work that into your business model, it's well worth the effort.
There's a huge difference in leads who come in just like they found us on Google, however it could be paid or organic, versus somebody who's consumed a lot of content.
Yeah.
Like, it's a totally different conversation. The trust is already built. They kind of feel like they already know the company, and it's just a much easier conversation for sales to have. I wish they could all be that way.
Yeah. They're not, though.
They're not. That's right.
But there's plenty of them to go around. I mean, that's
right.
We jokingly say that you pass clients from one management company to the
Well, it's just a huge market, right? I mean, that's the thing that's so shocking to us is you feel like some of these companies are getting bigger and bigger, but there's still a drop in the bucket of the whole opportunity out there.
Yeah.
And we had, nobody's really cracked the DIY side of the business either.
No. And I think, I don't know that there's a crack out there in the next 5 years for that. But going back to that question, part of, you kind of got off to the boutique operator. I truly feel that they're always going to be safe, in my opinion, within my lifetime, because they want that extra special level of service. They want accompanied showings. They want the hand holding. They want the explanation of.
They want the owner's cell phone.
That's right.
To text. They want text back.
And, we used to have agents come in all the time, and it's like, you know what? I started off trying to earn some revenue, and I took on the management of these properties, and I'm trying to sell. Plus, I've got 35 units over here I'm managing. I get no peace. My phone's ringing all the time.
You're like, welcome to property management.
Welcome to property management. And I jokingly say one thing I learned, within the first. I held on to it for 2 years, but I used to get my cell phone out on the front end. And then my business cards from that point forward, when I had business cards, the cell phone was off of them. So it was just the office line. You could have my email all day long, but not my cell phone number.
Hey, when you're young and trying to earn that business,
you're hustling. You got to go for it.
Cell phone.
I still have people text me and call me that were clients.
Yeah.
They've been clients over a decade, and they're like, "Hey, I'm having trouble getting in touch with my property manager."
Yeah, I had an owner from Ohio once that my wife was literally having surgery. She was being wheeled back for surgery, and he's calling me because he's upset about something on his house in Hoover. And so my wife went back. I took the call, and I'm like, you know what? I'll call you tomorrow. So I called my team right after that, and I'm like, okay, we're terminating the agreement with this guy, and we'll give him notice tomorrow.
Well, Matthew was so bad at communication, I had to actually work here to get any FaceTime with him. I was like, why aren't you? What are you doing with my properties? Well, Bryan, this has been fantastic. It's great. It was great to have you here. Anything else you want to hit on before we head out?
I just want to tell you, appreciate you coming by, and we've been looking forward to doing this for a long time, and appreciate you joining us.
Likewise, I appreciate you guys, and just the only thing I'd like to add is if listeners are not registered for the NARPM National Conference coming up third week of October, I believe it's the 20th in Orlando. So no matter how old you are, Orlando, you can find some fun times there. So you got young kids, bring them along. If you don't, go to the theme parks by yourself. So,
there you go.
Yeah, always great to be around fellow property managers, learn, meet new connections. You learn so much just from hanging out in the hallways too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks for that, Bryan. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Evernest Property Management Show.